knock, knock on the door. Who's there? It's the world of professional wrestling. And, Roddy Piper and, Cyndi Lauper. And you're like, all right, I'll jump in there. So, how did you enjoy the circus and the male soap opera that is known as professional wrestling?
I got to tell you, circus is a very accurate description, both on and off camera. It was weird. It was so weird. And I started working there in February. And the very first day I was there, I was supposed to go out for dinner with, I can't even remember who it was, but there was a wrestler in town that day. And we were taking him out for dinner with like some bigwig from Rogers or something like that. And there was a snowstorm, and it was just like the most surreal day. It's like, there was the kind of like, it was like today, for those of you who don't know, we're taping this in December in the midst of the storm of the century, right?
It's 2023, Dawn.
Oh, sorry. Go back in time.
Fine. It's actually almost Christmas Eve and it is snowing, I guess.
Yeah. And it is
We tried to fool them. We're not fooling anybody. All right.
But it was like, okay, what the heck am I doing? Why am I here at this dinner? I don't even know any of these people, right? Like, okay. I started working there in February, and WrestleMania.
The year is 2004, I believe.
Year's 2004. Yeah. And so WrestleMania is always like the beginning of March, right? WrestleMania, ironically, is always, or used to always be, the same night as the Juno Awards. Which, I mean, I was always working the Juno Awards.
Which no wrestling fan ever knew. The Juno Awards is the Canadian equivalent of the Grammy Awards.
Yes. Very big deal.
So our international viewers that are watching this right now all over the world, including the United States, are saying, what the heck's a Juno? It's a Grammy in Canada.
It's a Grammy in Canada, for sure.
It's like kilometers and miles.
It's also the reason why when I went to WWE and they were complaining about the fact that they never got great coverage for the WrestleMania, and I looked at the calendar and I said, well, because it's the same night as the Juno Awards, which is kind of a big deal in Canada. That's why you're never getting that great medium coverage.
Was it WWF at the time, or was
it was E when I started there? It was I think, a couple of years after the whole Get the F Out.
They already got the F out?
Yeah.
Okay, so now they were done.
By the way, is a great marketing campaign.
Well, it's amazing when you go back into the folklore, because Vince McMahon Sr., had WWF.
Yep.
Vince Jr. shorts it to WWF. The World Wildlife Fund is not really thrilled with this. No, don't know how anybody can make that misconception. They're like, well, you know what? I want to get away from professional wrestling. We are sports entertainment.
Yeah, yes. Sports entertainment. I forgot about that. I will say this, though. At the time I worked there, WWE was considered to be one of the top 10 most recognized brands in the world.
Still is, I think.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I mean, coming from music, we never worried about the company. We never talked about, I work for Columbia Records or Epic or Arista, except maybe if we're going to talk about Clive Davis. We didn't talk about the label. We talked about the artist, right? So that was kind of a switch for me to have to learn to talk about the company, have to learn to talk about Raw and SmackDown and trademark protection and, all those kinds of things. So that was a bit of a learning curve for me. But so I start in February. I kind of get thrown right into getting prepped for WrestleMania. The very first show I ever attended was WrestleMania 20 at Madison Square Garden. And I remember, you'll love this, I remember sitting there in the afternoon watching some of the sound checks and watching Undertaker was coming back. He was returning from the dead. And I remember sitting there watching them block out and rehearse Undertaker's entrance by myself, up in the cheap seats in MSG, thinking to myself, wow, there are people who would give their right arms to be sitting here watching this right
I would
now.
give a kidney for that, Dawn.
Yeah. It was kind of a cool
my
moment.
Lord. And to understand the mecca of Madison Square Garden.
Well, yeah, like talk about that being my
mecca.
First show. WrestleMania 20 at MSG. Like, that's kind of big.
I grabbed my son, I grabbed my nephew. This was a few years back, maybe around 2019, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I said, guys, we're going to go to Madison Square Garden and we are going to watch professional boxing. Anthony Joshua is going to come from the UK and defend his belts. He was supposed to fight a different guy, but he got busted for drugs. So they brought a last minute guy named Andy Ruiz. We're going to watch this boxing match, guys. To be in Madison Square Garden for this and any kind of event is epic.
Yeah.
And we watched one of the biggest, if not the biggest, upsets in professional boxing history in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
So no matter where you are in the world and no matter what you are watching, when it's in Madison Square Garden, it's huge.
Yeah.
But Madison Square Garden has a very special relationship with professional wrestling because back in the day, when Vince Sr. was controlling things and it was a territorial base, they were based out of the New York area. So Madison Square Garden
Mhm.
was their territory. So there's
Yep.
always a very special place in WWE's heart for Madison Square Garden,
And
and
MSG
you're
is
there.
it's iconic on its own.
But it's so
You know,
ugly from the outside. You'd never
oh, it's
guess
ugly. It's
it.
ugly from the inside too. It's old and ugly and nasty, but I mean, it's an iconic building, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that moment was pretty huge. It was pretty, wow, this is a big freaking deal to be here, right? And then from there, that was the night that Chris Benoit won the title. So from there, we go into, I can't remember the name of the next pay-per-view. Oh, I
Because
don't remember all the
they've changed them drastically. Royal Rumbles before
Royal Rumble's
WrestleMania.
right before Royal
Or
Rumble is
then you
like
got
in
summer,
November.
then you got SummerSlam.
SummerSlam is August.
Yeah, so it's one of them in the middle. I'm trying to think of
Well,
which
there's
one.
one every month, right? There's a
Now,
pay-per-view
yeah,
every month, but the
was there one
one,
a month back then as well?
yeah. I
But
can't
back then,
remember what the
like Hell
one.
in a Cell, you had In Your House, all that
Yeah,
kind of
I don't
stuff.
remember. Anyway, whatever
Yes.
it was. The first one
Hmm.
after that was in Edmonton, which
Yes.
is Chris Benoit's hometown. So
Yes.
I literally, like, right from the get-go, got thrown in. Okay, Chris, that's it. This is the, like, this is your priority right now. Chris Benoit, Edmonton pay-per-view, blah, blah, blah. So, like, right from the get-go, got thrown right into the wolves. So yeah, that was the first. Madison Square Garden WrestleMania was the first pay-per-view I went to. Didn't really do much there because I didn't really, I was kind of learning the ropes and everything. But yeah, the first one in Edmonton was the first one that was kind of like my show to run. Yeah.